I'm going to share the history of Living Hope Church as my first point. Normally what I do in this time slot is share the history of our land and building acquisition and the process we walked through. This year I'm tweaking it a bit. I want to give you a brief overview, but especially of the early days of Living Hope Church. This is mostly inspired by the fact that we celebrated 35 years, September 1. I hope you give glory to God for his faithfulness through the years. We worked hard and we labored. And a number of us served in extraordinary, heroic ways. We worked hard and labored, but I want to be clear, God built the house. And by saying God built the house, I'm not talking about the building. I'm talking about the church, people. God has been faithful, and he built the house. If he doesn't build the house, we labor in vain, but God has always been faithful. We've been through good times. We've been through some hard times, as every church does. It's life in a fallen world. It can't be helped. But God never abandoned us, and he never will. He's true to his word, and we praise him. Living Hope started as an adoption, September 1, 1986. Nowadays, we don't use adoption language. Now we use replant language. That is effectively what it was. A church in Lebanon asked the church we were at in Lancaster, I was not a pastor at the time, but asked our church for help. They wanted to get involved in what is now Sovereign Grace Churches. I was not a pastor, but we had been approached by friends of ours about relocating with them as they sought to plant a church or lead a church, and we said, we're in. Beth and I said, we'll go, and there was talk of up and down the East Coast somewhere. We ended up relocating from Lancaster to the Hershey area, which wasn't a very long trip, but we thought we would go further. That's just the way it unfolded. So this church replant is being considered, and the leaders invite Beth and I to come along to a meeting with the folks in Lebanon. And afterwards, they were kind enough to ask me my thoughts. And I have opinions, and I'm happy to share them freely. And so I said, don't do it. Don't do it. I can't see it. And the reasons I couldn't see it was the church was largely 40 to 50-year-olds, some 60-year-olds. We were 30. And I just wasn't sure about how these folks would receive from young people who knew it all. Just wasn't sure how that would go. And Lebanon, I apologize if you're from Lebanon. I don't know Lebanon now today, but back then, Lebanon was a dying town with an inside culture. There was insiders and there was outsiders. It may still be the same. It may not be. I make no judgment now. I'm just saying back then, there was a clear insider culture. We weren't. So I thought, let's go somewhere else and plant. Long story short, love to give you some details. The leaders went ahead with adopting this church. And the reason I'm sharing this is because this was a struggle for me for about 5 years. Early on, I struggled with the existence of Living Hope Church because I didn't think it should happen. And as Beth says, I like my opinions, I like my plans, and if it shouldn't happen, we shouldn't be here, but we are here, so I'm trying to make the best of it. It was a mistake in my opinion. And what it does is it raises a question which you might want to consider in your life. How do you reconcile God's sovereignty with what you think is a mistake? You know God's sovereign, right? I think we all believe that here at Living Hope. He's sovereign. He does what he plans. He executes what he wants. He rules and reigns over all things. We make decisions. We make choices. I think that's a mistake. What do you do with that? What do you do with that in your life? How do you reconcile mistakes and sovereignty? The first several years were hard. There were leadership blunders. I can own that freely because I wasn't one, so it's a cheap shot maybe. But there were blunders. There were accusations. Folks were leaving. We had some growth. It was difficult departures because it was family and friends. But it turns out God has promised Christians that our life will be hard. We're not promised an easy time, and we're not promised that everything will just go well all the time. We're called to persevere and endure. So we didn't want to go back to Lancaster. Never once was it in our hearts to let's go back. We did not want to go back. But anywhere else in Sovereign Grace would have been acceptable. Here's the point. If we were birds, we'd have flown away because it was hard and we thought it was a mistake and I didn't know what to do with this. So in 1990, I'm hired as an associate pastor, and all I'll say about that is sometimes naivete is a real blessing. We had no idea what was ahead. We had no clue. I was sent to the School of Ministry first, which was invaluable. Now it's the pastor's college. Kevin Bush was just there. Invaluable for Beth and I, but we returned to a discouraged church. It was like, what happened in the 9 months we were away? I'm sure it had nothing to do with us, but the church seemed well, and now it seems discouraged. The leaders weren't doing well. We did a leaders meeting on our return. It was a struggle. What do you do with that? We were eager to get to work and serve, but things were stagnant. The next 18 months was simply one long string of confusion. One after the other. My friend, who was the lead pastor, would say one day, how about I lead the church? Can't you lead the church? The next day it was, he'll lead the church, and then he'll oversee the church, which we didn't have a category for. And it was bouncing around back and forth. Beth just finally said, just tell me what you're going to do when it's done. She got tired of hearing about it. I was tired of hearing about it, but I was in the middle of it. So in April of 93, so it's about almost 7 years after the church starts, our senior pastor, a mentor and friend to me for 15 years, our relationship was totally tested, out of the blue resigns. So our leaders turned to me and asked if I'm willing to lead the church. I said yes, but I'm a rookie. I did believe I was called to serve as a pastor, and I did believe I was called to be the next lead pastor at Living Hope. I just didn't think it was going to be in 2 years. I thought it was 10 years or more down the road, but here it was happening at a quick point in time. So I was a rookie and I needed help. I did not view myself as an impressive person. No one was saying, I need to plant a church, I need to lead a church, your gifts will make room for you. That was not in the mix. In my view, at Living Hope, honest view, there were 5 or 6 guys just as gifted as me, in complete honesty, and they had just about as much experience. I'll grant you I had Beth, and that was a serious leg up. I'll never forget the meeting where we announced to the church this transition. Folks were upset and angry. It wasn't at me, and it wasn't personal. They were just upset by what was going down. All I remember thinking is, this is going to crash and burn. This is not going to end well. I thought I would get to bury the church. Beth can vouch regarding our conversations. I was persuaded God had put me in the role of lead pastor so that I could help people transition out without diminishing their enthusiasm for Jesus or his bride. I thought the church was going to die, and I had individuals informing me that that was a distinct option. I was not crazy in my own mind. One friend said to me, I would rate our odds as 50-50. And I said, thanks, I love raving optimists. It's just good to have you here, because I wasn't seeing 50-50. And the reason I'm sharing this is I want you to see where we are today in light of what's taking place. It was a difficult path and a difficult journey. So in June 1, 1993, I already alluded to my first Sunday, I'm installed. We had $5,000 in the bank. Memo, that's not a lot. It is $9,000 in today's dollars, if that helps you any. It doesn't help me a whole lot. I mean, we had a church recently closed down because they only had $9,000 in the bank. So that's what I meant by naivete. It's a wonderful thing. You don't know what you're getting into, but you step in. So in that October of 93, we sent out my friend, leader to me for 15 years, and his wife, my sister, my cousin and his wife and a former pastor, and they were going to attempt to focus on evangelism. I take the next 2 Sundays to explain to folks, not normal sermons at all, to explain to folks my view, my understanding of what just happened, of what was going down here at Living Hope. And in this time, I said, this is just a great time to think about whether you want to be here or not. If you're here, I'll be here. If you're not, we're all out of here. And I didn't want to do a slow, agonizing death over 5 years. It was like, if we're going to die, let's just get it over with and die. And let's move on with life. As you can see, a good number of folks stayed. I think 2 families left, if I recall correctly. They were heading out anyway. Had nothing to do with me stepping in or anything I said. The remarkable thing, and this is a long story, I don't have time to go into it this morning. The remarkable thing is the church, by the grace of God, begins to grow. It is most unlikely that this would happen. And about 5 years later, it's 1998, it starts to dawn on me that the church might not die. Like, I should actually think about the future and what we're doing and where we're going, because it appears folks are sticking around. And I say again, this caught me by surprise. I didn't see it coming. So if you've been to Pastor's Coffee, you've heard the stories. We started in the Lebanon Quality Inn, went to Hummelstown Fire Hall, went to Youth for Christ, went to High Spire. These were all steps down. They were not in any way better. We just needed a place to meet, and it was the only option to consider. And so we did it. Moved out of High Spire to the Holiday Inn in 95, the middle school, Susquehanna Township in 2001. And in 2003, we started raising funds for land and a building. This was somewhat of a surprise to me because my roots are anti-building. I am not a fan of a building. I said to folks, this is what I think we're supposed to do, but just please understand, a building is more work, not less. This is going to be harder for us, not easier. Some folks thought it would just be like, they don't have to serve anymore, have to do anything. It's like, no, I'm telling them, no, this is going to be hard. It's going to be hard work. But I said, I'm fine with giving to a building because it's reserve funds, if nothing else, and I love reserves. So in 1998, folks started giving to a building fund. We raised $100,000 out of folks' interest just by running a once-a-month blurb in the announcement sheet we had back then, and I didn't give $1. I wasn't in until 2003. So folks were giving, folks were interested. We weren't trying to do anything. I laid out at that point a 7-year plan, which was 3 years on, 1 year not giving, 3 years on, and we'll find land and build what we can afford. And we had a serious delay after the 7-year plan relating to the utility companies. But the remarkable thing is folks kept giving. This church, by the grace of God, excels in the grace of giving. Yes. And in attempting this morning to share about raising funds, I want you to know how much I respect you for the way you give. It is to me an amazing evidence of grace. We built the building in 2016 and 17 with amazing provision from credit unions, and we occupied this facility May 2017. It's going to be 5 years in May, and I still can't believe it. I can't believe that we are in a facility. So we installed Ben as lead pastor before coming into the building in 2016 for 3 very good reasons. It seemed best to have me lead the building project, which I didn't anticipate. I was asked to lead our region. Didn't want to do that as a lead pastor. And it seemed wise to keep Ben and Kate Krebs here and not have them plant. We wanted to plant churches, but it's hard to send dollars out the door and use the dollars here. So it seemed best to keep them around as well because I wasn't sure how long I would serve. I'm getting up there in years. And so lining a replacement up seemed best. So for Ben, here's what I want you to hear. This was a sacrifice for Ben. He wanted to plant. And he agreed to decide to stay. It was no sacrifice for Kate. Kate didn't want to go anywhere. So straight honest, folks, straight honest. But it's not lost on me that Ben laid down a dream, is the point. So how did I resolve the question I had about Living Hope Church being a mistake? How do you resolve the difference that you see if you see a mistake in life and you're wrestling with God is sovereign and there's a mistake? If you get an answer, let me know, because I didn't resolve it. I got to work where I was planted. I didn't look back, left the past behind, clean slate, got to work, and let's see what God has. I never did resolve it. I could have been wrong. I don't know anything about that time frame. All I know is we pressed on, we went forward. And I know one day we'll see a beautiful tapestry that's our life, where we see everything tied together and pulled together in ways that will just amaze us. But I can't see it now. All I know is forward and onward. And let's look ahead. And let's leave the past behind while appreciating what we can about the past. So I never did solve the dilemma. My first 10 years of sermons, at least, were awful. I'll say this, I was sincere. If sincerity counts for anything, I was sincere. And I mentioned Jesus. But those sermons, I couldn't possibly preach one of them today or ever. But listen, folks stuck it out. And I'm grateful. I'm hoping they felt some sense of being pastored and being led through those years. When you consider what we have at Living Hope now, I think we're wise to thank God for building the house. I mean the church again, not just the building. Wise to thank God for building the house. And remember, we stand on the shoulders of others. So friends, look forward 35 years. In 35 years, I'll be 102. So I'm betting I'm not here. If you want to make that bet, let me know. It's rare to make 102. But I want to say, live your life now so that if Jesus tarries, so that in 35 years, others can look at you and stand on your shoulders, as we looked at folks who have been here 35 years for the glory of God. It wasn't pretty along the way. It didn't start pretty. There were difficult moments. But if you look now, you don't know any of that. It's all in the past, as if this is just all great, and praise God, we love Jesus, it's just all good. There was blood, sweat, and tears. It was hard at points. And there were blessings along the way too. That's how life is. But God saw us through, and now we are here. So look forward and contemplate what legacy your life might have. So most other years I've told you about the story of the land and the building, and Lord willing, I'll do it again sometime. But this morning, I thank God for folks who persevered. I thank God for endurance. I thank God for steadfastness in folks' lives. And I thank God that folks made it through all these years. Nothing particularly romantic to recall. Good times mixed in, certainly hard times. But the Lord built the house through it all. So what I can say is that we informed Living Hope along the way that the building was a ministry tool that we were purchasing, and we would pay for the building along the way by raising funds. So briefly, here's our financial goals. I'll throw some numbers at you so you understand where we are. Again, let me say thank you for your giving and the way the gospel has affected your life for the glory of God. I boast about you regularly to others. On Monday at the Council of Elders, I had the chance to represent the executive committee and making a presentation. I boast about you and the way we were able to keep giving to Sovereign Grace right on through doing the building. We didn't want anything to change ministry-wise. We wanted to buy the building, but we wanted to raise special funds for that. So I love to mention you and what you've accomplished, what we've accomplished together. Our building project cost $5.5 million in total. We borrowed $2.7 million, which means we raised $2.8 million. I have no idea how we did that. $2.8 million? Go raise $2.8 million. Sure. Which door should I run through first? That's remarkable. I don't know how that happened. It did, but I have no idea how. We started off with a 25-year mortgage, 4.5% fixed for 5 years. We refinanced, locked in a higher rate for 10 years. And we shortened it down to a 20-year amortization. So we're 2 years into that. We have about 18 years to go. And we'd love to pay it off sooner or faster if we could. Our payments are about $175,000 a year. So just to give you a handle, if everyone gives an extra 2.5% over what you're giving to Living Hope, we easily get to that number. Many of us are able to give more, and we know some of us can't give that much. I'm just trying to give you a handle of what it looks like to raise $175,000. In February this year, we negotiated our rate down to 4%, which was good work by somebody, and in the existing 10-year time frame. So we need $175,000 a year. We still owe $2.18 million, and if someone wants to write a check for that amount, we will receive it, no problem. Just make it out to Living Hope Church, and we're all good to go. Along the way, there were always questions about debt. Was it wise to take on debt? And along the way, in teaching Living Hope, I said, yes, it is wise to take on debt. And I made the point that in saving your way there, you have to bank on no inflation to say that it's unwise to borrow money. And I couldn't do that in the landscape in which we live. 1 year after we built, our project would have cost $1 million more. I know that from an estimate church had in Jonestown, where they were asking us how we did what we did. And I want you to see the favor of the Lord in that. If we would try to build now, it'd be $2 to $3 million more, because everything has escalated. Steel, wood, the whole package, everything is up like crazy. The point is that saving our way there wasn't a good strategy. But now, we would love to retire that mortgage. We would love to work at that. So again, I say, if it's on your heart, we will take contributions to that end. We did it together as a team, and we continue to plug away. Because we're receiving an offering next week, we're able to do normal ministry. For example, we give 10% every year, every month, 10% of our general fund, not building fund, general fund, to Sovereign Grace churches. And I love the things that are taking place there. Hope you get to hear more in weeks to come about what's happening there. We were able to send Kevin and Beth Bush to the Pastor's College. We want to send others. We didn't need to do special offerings for that. We were able to pay for that out of the funds that you give. And we're talking about church plants and looking forward to what we can do in that regard. We have together walked by faith for the glory of God. Here's something I want to say that I'll repeat again later. Everyone who has given to this building project in considerable ways is prospering financially. There's not a one who can say, I sacrificed to give, and it's really hurt us. It's remarkable how God has been faithful to person after person after person. God has promised to be faithful, and he is, and we say that to the praise of his grace. We imitate the example of Abraham, Hebrews 11:10, for he was looking forward to the city that has foundations, whose designer and builder is God. And speaking of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all flawed men who live by faith, Hebrews 11, these all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For people who speak thus make it clear they're seeking a homeland. If they'd been thinking of that land from which they'd gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, this is us, as it is, they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared for them a city. We too acknowledge we're strangers and exiles. We're not at home in this world. Larry Norman said, this world's not my home. I'm just passing through. And he's right. This profoundly affects the way we live and the way we give. This is not home, and we're looking for a city. We got to make ends meet, absolutely. But this is not the end. This is not what matters most. What matters most is what's on ahead. It affects our giving. It affects the way we live. We were able to walk by faith because you had a view of a strong, good, and faithful God. You had that. J.I. Packer in Knowing God. The Christian's instincts of trust and worship are stimulated very powerfully by knowledge of the greatness of God. But this is knowledge which Christians today largely lack. And that's one reason why our faith is so feeble and our worship so flabby. We're modern people, and modern people, though they cherish great thoughts of themselves, have, as a rule, small thoughts of God. Don't be modern people. That's not us, and that hasn't been Living Hope over these decades. I say again, folks who gave have prospered, and our folks did this walking in conviction. Jerry Bridges in Discipline of Grace, a conviction is a determinative belief. So we don't particularly expect people to start off feeling like giving, because it's a sacrifice for most of us. A conviction's a determinative belief, something you believe so strongly it affects the way you live. Someone has observed a belief is what you hold, but a conviction is what holds you. You may live contrary to what you believe, but you cannot live contrary to your convictions. Convictions matter, friends. And we had folks here at Living Hope who had convictions about giving. But this applies to all life. This applies to our evangelistic efforts. You can say, oh, yeah, I believe in telling others about Jesus. Oh, absolutely. On a true-false test, I'll put true. I believe in telling others about Jesus. It's a different matter to have a conviction. When you have a conviction, now you're applying it into your life. It isn't just, yeah, I believe it. It's not just something you hold. A conviction has you, and you're living in the good of it. And I love that so many of you have convictions regarding the Christian life. So I've watched how God has provided for the folks who carried the heavy part of the lifting here at Living Hope. I want to remind you, God has always been faithful to us so that you know He will be faithful to you in the future as you continue to follow Him. Third point, how to lay up treasures in heaven. Here's our text, Matthew 6:19-24. Jesus is teaching about money in the Sermon on the Mount, and He says, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, because He's speaking to disciples, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot, says Jesus, you cannot serve God and money. Two clear commands from Jesus. Do not lay up treasures on earth, but lay up treasures in heaven. Our daughter Sarah terrorized high school students and junior high students when we did the homeschool track and field day way back there, decades back, 25 years ago. We still meet folks who talk about her performance. When Sarah was in junior high, her teammate went on to win a silver medal in the heptathlon in the Olympics in Beijing, 2008. And these two on a track and field team together were just lethal. They just destroyed the competition. It was no contest, and it was a blast to watch. They also played basketball, and it was painful to watch because they couldn't shoot layups. They're fast. They'd grab the rebound, get the ball on an outlet pass, sprint down the court, running past everybody, and absolutely brick the layup by clanging it off the backboard. And this was painful to watch because they needed coaching, they needed help, they needed to know how to do a layup. And they did not get this help. We aren't playing basketball here this morning. Jesus is talking to us about how we lay up treasures in heaven. We must manage our resources, and we either lay up treasures in heaven or we're laying up treasures on earth. Jesus explains 3 dangers as we consider our options and choices. We'll either live for the here and now or we'll look forward for that city. Danger number 1, verses 19 to 21, is laying up treasures in the wrong place. What are treasures? It's simply our wealth. It's our possessions. It's our money. Like any good teacher or parent, Jesus gives instructions regarding reasons for his instructions. He says possessions don't stay in good condition. They don't. They fall apart. They rust, whatever. And if you could manage to preserve them, then someone wants to steal them. Think of famous art. If you can lock it up and preserve it, nevertheless, someone wants to break in and steal it. Jesus is not teaching against personal ownership. We must have something to give after all. We shouldn't steal. If there's no possessions, there's no stealing. And we should save according to the Bible. Wealth is not evil. Wealth is not evil. It's love of money that's evil. So the issue is self. Do you lay up treasures for yourself? We're told by Jesus to send them on ahead where things are incorruptible. How do we send things on ahead? We invest in activities that matter. So we grow in godly character. That's why we fellowship here at Living Hope with one another. It's why we're in community groups. We grow in godly character. We grow in faith, hope, and love. We share the gospel with others. We give our money strategically. For us, that was a building here at Living Hope. We need clear vision to see into the future, because you got to know where you're laying up your treasures. You need clear vision, which brings us to danger number 2, seeing incorrectly. Verses 22 and 23. The eye is a metaphor for the heart. Our behaviors proceed from our heart. How can Jesus say disciples might live in darkness? Well, it's possible to be a Christian but live for the wrong things. This is even more deadly when it comes to leaders, because we'll give an account of our resources to God. So in 1 Corinthians 3:11 and following, Paul writes, no one can lay a foundation other than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it. The day is the final day, because it'll be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he'll receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. So Jesus Christ is our salvation. Jesus Christ is our all in all. His life, his death, his resurrection are everything to us. It's a foundation. And as we live our lives, as we follow Jesus, we're building on the work he did. The question is, what does that work look like? Those who see correctly now know this world is not the final word. They know there's something beyond that we are called to live for. And the way we live for that makes all the difference in the here and now. What prevents us from laying up treasures in heaven? Randy Alcorn says there are many roadblocks to giving: unbelief, insecurity, pride, idolatry, desires for power and control. The raging current of our culture and often our churches makes it hard to swim upstream. It's considered normal to keep far more than we give. But I'm convinced the greatest deterrent, says Randy, to giving is this: the illusion that earth is our home. It's not home, but one day we will be home. And if we believe this world has a final say, we will serve the wrong master. So danger 3 is serving the wrong master. That's verse 24. This is slave language. We who are in Christ are slaves of Christ, and we're happily slaves of Christ. We died to ourselves. We no longer live, but Christ lives in us, and we're happy about that. Once we were going our own way, doing our own thing, but God's grace broke in. His love captured our hearts. John Stott defines grace this way. Grace is love. It's Jesus. Grace is love that cares and stoops and rescues. We've been rescued by Jesus. And that is glorious. And now we look at, well, who then is our master? Who is Lord of our life? In the text, Jesus says your choice is God or money. You can't serve both. So when God is our master, it looks like this. We practice a tithe as a starting point. It's not a New Testament law, but we simply say, I'm giving 10% to acknowledge God's ownership in my life. He is Lord. He is all to me. We recognize his ownership. We give to the poor. We give to widows and orphans. We care about the poor in the world. Jesus said they'll always be with you. They're always around us, but we have a heart for them. We give offerings to eternal causes as the Spirit leads. We have a heart to do more than we can. A lot of folks here at Living Hope want to give more than they do. They would just love to give more because they're willing to spend and be spent on behalf of this Jesus that they love. And your security is in God, not money or possessions. Wealth is a good gift. I say again, we steward it wisely, and in doing so, we care for our family. If we don't care for our family, we're worse than an unbeliever, whatever that is. So we care for our families. We help others in need, like Covenant Mercy. We give to see the gospel shared, like Sovereign Grace Churches or Paul Michaels and Finish the Mission. And we know how to abound. We aren't grumpy about others enjoying something in life. We know how to abound. We know how to enjoy life while our eyes are fixed on an eternal feast that will be ours with Jesus. So happily, many of you know the joy of sending treasure on ahead. You are executing that layup into eternity correctly. And I say to you, well done. But it's my job to make sure we're all executing that layup correctly. And so I'm inviting each one of you to consider the trajectory you're on. And are you loving possessions? Are you loving things here and now? Or are you looking for that city to come? Are you practicing wisely what Jesus tells us to do? I can tell you on that day, there will be no regrets. So let me close. Next Sunday, Ben will preach and we will receive an offering. We'll invite you to consider a one-time gift or monthly gifts. But I encourage you to pray, get counsel, and see what you can give in happy dollars. This is not a time to be grudging in what we're giving. This is a time to give happily toward what God is doing here at Living Hope. Invest your money wisely so you send it on ahead. We invest in a facility, not because it's easier, but because the ministry tool helps us reach people. And this will be the case all the more in the days to come. I can't wait to see it. We aim to see converts and baptisms. We're making disciples. We aim to see church plants. We aim to see good works taking place. We want to be salt and light. Let's make the good gift of this one life count for the glory of God. Let's lay up treasures in heaven, not just lay them up for ourselves here on earth.